All right, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. This is the last video for Psychic Warfare, Exploring the Mind Frontier by Dolan M. McKelvey, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force. The last two chapters are going to be Chapter 7 and Chapter 8. They're small enough to condense into one video. So we're going to go through recommendations and then conclusions. I'm not going to read off the list of references. There are some additional pages to this document not listed here in the indices that are related to correspondence between two people who oversaw this document's creation and then their response to it. I might add it in as a separate video, but I'm not going to add it in here. I will scroll through it on the video. That way, if you want to read it in your own time, you can without having to download the document itself. All right, so here we go. Recommendations, Chapter 7. 7 years after Lieutenant Colonel Alexander's article appeared in the Military Review, I can only concur with his message, and more so. The implications of a distant U.S. second place in the parapsychology mind race with the Soviet Union are unthinkable. Total vulnerability. Yet this appears to be a real possibility. We are no better or stronger than our weakest link, and our total dependence on high-tech, sophisticated electronic weapon systems may be our Achilles heel. Continued coordinated research is imperative for rapid advancement. Psi-smart leaders at all levels are essential for necessary resource support, strategic thinking, and acceptance of the threat potential we might soon encounter. Targ would argue that, quote, the mind race should not be seen as a psychic competition between nations. Rather, it is a race to develop our own innate potential for extended awareness. While I can agree with this theory, I agree even more with Marcello Truzzi when he says, quote, our government has a responsibility to achieve security and military parity, if not superiority, in relation to our potential enemies. Thus, even if the probabilities for psi research producing anything practical are small, it would be negligence for our guardians in government to ignore such matters, especially when others are pursuing such avenues. Long shots have paid off in the past. Atomic energy was once a wild idea. Opponents to psi research today are similar to the late Admiral William Leahy, chief of the U.S. Naval Operations from 1937 to 1939. He said, quote, the A-bomb is the biggest fool thing we've ever done. The bomb will never go off, and I speak as an expert on explosives. To accomplish these objectives means 1. Opening the super-secret door to allow broader classified knowledge of psi's true capabilities, where we are, and where we are going. 2. Focusing military exploration resources and start targeting capabilities defenses like we did for the strategic defense initiatives. 3. Doing strategic thinking on a totally new type of warfare. Opening the super-secret door is necessary to begin acclimating the military community to psi's true capabilities. It is past time for bringing psi into the open, where everyone can benefit from a realistic awareness of it. Otherwise, how do we expect people to accept and use psi capabilities? Let's learn from our personal experiences with computers. We are still trying to get leaders accustomed to hands-on computer systems. Changing attitudes takes time. The sooner we begin using psi to complement other systems, the sooner we will build a reliable psi force and gain managements of confidence. Targ said, quote, we believe the question of psi's usefulness and importance may be settled in the next decade. Settling this question will not require another century. It will probably be settled in the marketplace and in the everyday lives of millions of people, and not, alas, in the corridors of Cambridge. The military community needs to be poised on this leading edge, lest it fall behind the society it is sworn to protect. Focusing resources and targeting capabilities is the cornerstone to knowing the true picture. Otherwise, who has the stick? Who really knows where we are and what it will take to get where we need to be? How else can we present accurate, reliable information to senior leadership for prioritizing resources? Targ notes that the popular view of our relationship to space and time is inadequate. One possible conclusion is that there is something incomplete about our understanding of the space-time continuum in which we exist. This is Bearden's position also. So the military needs to force the scientific community to open their eyes and minds to better understand paranormal events and the new physical principles which explain them. Renowned Soviet physicist and Nobelian P. Kapitsa informed Soviet leadership Khrushchev that if a means of total neutralization of foreign missiles was to be found, it could only come from a group of new principles in physics, which is called energetics. The term energetics was contracted from psychoenergetics and is essentially the expanded physics electromagnetics that Bearden has dubbed scalar electromagnetics. The military needs to find young blood in the scientific community who don't know all the reasons why something can't be done. They are the ones with fresh minds to evaluate Bearden's evolving concept of scalar electromagnetics and to find new physical principles explaining psychic phenomena. August Stern is one person in the West who actually worked in top secret Soviet military laboratories searching for a physical key to psychic phenomena. He warns, the Soviets will emerge with a completely new view of man, not of muscle and bone, but of quantum physics, magnetism, and electromagnetic waves. When that day comes, he asserts, they won't need to scour the countryside for psychics. They'll just build machines for manipulation of the mind. He goes on to remind us, but remember how surprised you were when they launched Sputnik. You better prepare. Strategic thinking is essential to preparing a solid foundation for a totally new type of warfare. The Air War College should incorporate this subject in its curriculum and present it and other futuristic technologies early in the overall curriculum. Knowledge of history must be combined with knowledge of future weapon systems, space technology, directed energy, psi, etc. To most effectively study war, challenge current leaders, and prepare future warriors. This is the place and the time to simulate or stimulate military visionaries. In the words of Edgar Allan Poe, those who dream by day are cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night. I did not know that's a good quote. In addition, speakers such as Bearden, Alexander, and others should be invited to a forum similar to the Aerospace Power Symposium, where the issues are put on the table, controversies explained, and the students really understand the weapons and threats they may soon employ or confront. So this is the chapter 8, and this is the conclusion. Before I get into that, obviously, there's some interesting points that the Lieutenant Colonel made here about falling behind and weapons about activating the human mind. Anybody that follows a lot of this stuff on their own is certainly paying attention to 5G radio towers and microwave radiation being passed through the atmosphere, and of course scalar electromagnetics, which I do not think has any known defense. I think scalar waves, although we use that word as if we've defined it, I don't think we have. We've only labeled it, identified it. Not. I get that magnetism is sort of the force multiplier of a dielectric universe, and I know those terms may seem unfamiliar to people. I'm not going to go into them, but my research into teaching myself on how to understand some of this stuff, at least from the technological aspect, not just necessarily the physical and biological side, but bioenergetics is another term that's used, and that's been used in reference to devices that we're able to read and help enhance people's abilities. So again, it's easy to imply, at least imply, that those weapons, those could be turned into weapons as well. We see technologies like video gaming consoles and video game systems that allow you to interact in a 3D environment with nothing more than a light sensor and noise, and it's the same thing. That's all we're really looking at. We're looking at various evolutions of this stuff as it has either reemerged in the private sector, or people have left the corporate or have left the government sector and gone into the private sector and kind of used these patents and this knowledge to create other things. And we're going to get into some other dialogue in the next chapter, but it's still in my mind that we're already being suppressed. Everyone's being suppressed. So conclusion, chapter 8. Man's greatest potential remains a prisoner of man. Exploring the mind frontier is essential to unlock our innate capabilities, and the key to successful exploration is a greater psychic awareness. The mind is rich in unfathomed resources, ripe for exploration, a limitless source of treasures for advancing all mankind, and a serious threat to those who ignore its potential. We must overcome our psychic inhibitions, stop denying the existence of paranormal events, and start trying to understand the nature of these events. Alexander's message is still valid and needs repeating. We are at risk. We need to open the security doors and open our minds to educate all levels within the military community. We need a well-coordinated, ongoing military exploration of Psi. Since the basic electronic components which form the foundation of our weapon systems appear to be vulnerable, we need Psi strategic thinking to chart the course for entering this entirely new battlefield dimension. In other words of James Thurber, quote, "Let us not look back in anger, nor forward in fear, but around in awareness." And that closes off this chapter and the document as a whole. Here are the list of references, and I'm just going to scroll through this so people can pause it and do what they want. CIA toys with extrasensory weapons, Washington Post. The reason why I don't think this is so important is because these are coming out of media sources, and I have bibliography documents that show non-media sources where it's coming from academic universities, private seminars, research groups, and stuff like that. So the lieutenant colonel, while doing some great research and reading through all this stuff, probably made some large correlations already on his own. I don't think that we have to reference this because there's actually better research available to us now. And commenting on that, it's interesting how the lieutenant colonel was dissuaded or attempted to be dissuaded from pursuing any knowledge about this stuff. And now here we are in November 2019 with at least 30,000 documents in declassified format, multiple television shows and series, one even being called Stargate. And I think that they're pushing for that to be relaunched or something like that, or redone again, as well as a movie. I think the movie Stargate, which I enjoyed it as well. But the Stargate may very well be in our minds. And I'm not going to say it is or isn't because there's still a lot of reading to do. And I will be reading over some other documents after this one. Again, just continue on in a series of documents with video. But we know that some important people took this very seriously for many years and spent a lot of money on it. So this looks like it's a document where somebody sent this copy of the lieutenant colonel's document to someone else. And it looks like it's the Defense Intelligence Agency. So the DIA was asked to review this. Someone in the DIA was asked to review this and make sure they were okay with publishing it. And they later followed up saying, we don't mind. We have a few amendments we would make, and we'd like to see some research and tablature data and stuff. But overall, we don't mind that it's published. And then there's a research proposal at the end. However, the research proposal isn't about continuing new research. It's really mining the vast classified libraries to see what has already been done, probably in an effort to not have to start all over and repeat certain things, but also in a way to kind of put fresh eyes on what was done and then say how much of this is valid, how much of this with our knowledge today are we able to debunk, and how much of this can we repeat with a better test. So let me just, I'll start from the fresh there. Research proposal, tentative title, research question, methodology, implications, and special requirements. So this was just really a literature grab, or what they would call pull sheets, where you'd have to go through existing research and just pull whatever you can to support whatever it is you're doing. Show personal research and get feedback. I mean, we have handwritten letters here. Current funding status with DOD, key players within DOD, Army, Air Force, organizations, people, research institutes with government contracts, recent news media, CNN, Army major before scientific board. Those are just referencing military magazines that only are really distributed to people within the military. People with talents, comments. So the lieutenant colonel wasn't even aware of some of the documents that I've actually already read, or wasn't able to get a hold of them even when this was published. And then we have a news clipping, a pull sheet from a newspaper. And what we want to look at is this one here, a Twilight Zone defense. And it's Newsweek, May 11th, 1987. And I want to show you this note here. Who are they? This note with this arrow. So you can read this article, just pause it and go through it. But this is all you need really right here. This is the declassifier analyst writing this. This is a few people, or perhaps on the clipping of this when it was first retrieved, who says, who are they? And that is most of the spectators were Hill and Pentagon aides. Who are they? They want to know who they were. Who attended this from the Pentagon and the Hill? Did they even have clearance? But the main point of me pointing this out is that as you go further through all these declassified documents, there's a lot of times where the analyst's notes, or whoever was responsible for declassing this stuff, it's like they knew what we were going to be looking for, and they'll cross things out that aren't even worth reading, and they'll circle things and highlight things. And it's almost like, and I'd say about 70% of the time, just sort of being not familiar with any of this and just going at this as an independent researcher, it's been very helpful. So I don't know if other people have gone through this to do the same exact thing we're doing, how many times this process has been repeated since these documents were declassified, but it's clear that somebody wants us to have this stuff. So whether the lieutenant colonel was afraid that nobody would ever get around to it, or not being able to, the extreme secrecy and no focal point where we need to get it out into the public somehow, or at least into the military to get studying again. After 2001, it became important to release this stuff, or somehow maybe there was just some sort of internal slip up where these documents were classified, and then they were ready to be they came up for review again in order to maintain that classification, 10 years later, 15, whatever the original classification required, and somebody decided to release them. I don't know how these were released. That would be an interesting question. I'd also like to know who facilitated the release, right? Was it a public group or public interest group? Was it people who have left the programs themselves and they wanted to know what happened to it? Is it people who have, seen what's happening with the technology that we're using now and seen the reports, and they themselves are noticing that certain lights aren't what they are, and 5G isn't exactly what they said it is, and all this other stuff? It would be interesting. I don't know if I could get to that. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that just yet, but we'll see. So that's the end of Psychic Warfare, Exploring the Mind Frontier, by Dolan M. McKelvey, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, and his research advisor, Colonel Donald N. Penzagan. Have a good night.